Hello, my name is Dan Humberg and I represent HarvestFires.com. If you're watching this video, you're probably either interested or facing the prospect of installing a kit on a combine harvester and looking for installation aids. This particular video will help with the installation of the tin set, the enclosure that boxes in the exhaust system components, in this case on a model 8250 Case IH combine, in particular the 2022 model year. I have other videos for the earlier model years. The 2021 has some changes, but prior to that they stayed the same for a while. In 2022, Case put a stainless steel enclosure around the exhaust manifold, and so the kit that I had to enclose the turbocharger and exhaust pipes after that prior won't fit the 22 model year, and so this is a new design to fit on the 22 model year, and we're showing how to install it on the combine. If you haven't already, you probably want to watch the video about how to fold up the tin set and put it together on the bench, because that'll help you with understanding how it goes on the combine. But I'm sitting in a combine at a dealership in a building that is rather warm right now, so I'm gonna get on with the installation. I probably won't put every screw on this one because it is a dealer's machine, and I'm just showing you how it goes together, but we'll show you how to put each part of the kit onto the combine so that you can follow this set of instructions. Let's see if there's any ground things we should do beforehand. I normally wear a hat in this location. You're between the engine and the grain tank. Don't need the hat so much because of the sunlight today. I'm inside a building, but it does act as an early warning system that you're about to hit your head on something that's rather unforgiving. Sometimes you end up bending over in here to pick up something that you've dropped. I've already had to do that once today, and you can easily bump into something. In any case, we're in this location, and I'll show you how to begin the installation of the kit. There are actually 16 pieces of tin, at least so far, unless I end up cutting something in two to make it fit on here. This is actually the prototype set of tin for this combine model. Any problems I find with the tin, I will change in the computer model and then order production sets of tin for your machines. But this is the first time through this for me, so I'm learning it the same way you would. I will edit the video down to keep the time within reason, and also to cut out any offensive language that I might use when I bump my head or scrape my knuckles on something or drop something. In any case, let's get started. I'm in the hole here, and I'll show you. I've taken off one piece of sheet metal here. There is a piece that sits right in here, right above the turbocharger. It's over here on the left side. I've got it sitting on top of the hatch here now. There are 4 bolts, 3 on the top here, and then 1 down below that pull that piece off. You probably will leave that off. I don't believe that the tin kit will probably fit with that piece on there. You shouldn't need it once the kit is in place anyway, because the entire hot system will be enclosed, and that metal shield there is actually there to direct air at the turbocharger to try to keep the turbocharger free of dust, I believe, so it doesn't accumulate dust on it. But in the case of flowers, that wouldn't necessarily keep it from having fires. So that's the first thing to do, is to take that off, and then we can go down in here and start installing tin. Now, I've got the camera on a magnetic mount, and I'll have to move it around occasionally in order to make it so that you can see and I can still work in here. I've also got a battery supply and a smartphone that's allowing me to see what you see. Okay, we're down in what I call the hole. Here's the turbocharger's exhaust turbine. This is the compressor turbine on the left. There's a pressure line that brings oil up to the turbocharger bearing in between the two here, and then we have the stainless steel box that Case is built around the exhaust manifold. We're going to use several of the bolts that hold this stainless steel box together to hold our kit on against that, so it's the anchor point for the box that we're adding on. I pulled out 1 bolt already. I pulled this one out here right above where the the oil line to the turbocharger comes in. It takes a 10 millimeter wrench to pull that, and they're not excessively tight, so you can pull that one out. Try not to drop it because it's stainless steel, and the magnet that you might use to pick up every other screw in this process that you drop at the bottom of the hole here, the magnet won't pick that one up. So that's where we're going to actually start. Okay, I'm starting with piece number 4. Your pieces are probably numbered with cuts through a flange somewhere. This is the prototype set. It just has it marked with a Sharpie on here, C8250. That piece is going to go up behind the turbocharger and up against to the left and against the face of the compressor turbine. This daisy pedal cutout here should slip around the vertical portion of that oil line that comes up to the top of the bearing. Now, in my case, it fits pretty well here right now. There's just a little gap around it, but I'm not going to do this for sake of time today. But I would take, if I were you, I would take a pliers and just take each of these pedals, just as much as you need, no more than what you need, and bend the pedal. In this case, you might bend them up in towards you here, just a little bit, so that the idea is I don't want this sharp, hard edge of this tin rubbing against that oil line in any way. That oil line is steel, but this is hardened by the laser on the edge, and so I want a smooth face. So if I tilt these pedals up 90 degrees, then only the smooth face of the steel could ever contact that oil line, and I don't want to abrade that oil line, because if you ever cut through that, you'll lose your engine oil, and then bad things happen. So this piece will go up from behind. You have to go down underneath the turbocharger. I find that if I tilt it about 45 degrees to the left, towards my left hand, it will slide up in here, and I can, with my other fingers, I can push this tab in place and line it up with the bottom, the bolt just to the bottom left of the turbocharger mount where we took that one off. I've cut a slot in this one because I did not have a hole for that one, and that was a mistake in the design. But I have a slot there now. You should either have a slot or a hole in that spot on your piece. Once you have that hole or slot lined up with that, then we can try and take this stainless steel bolt, fit it in there, and get it started. This is where you probably drop it 3 times and say something really bad. Interestingly, that piece was kind of hard to get in the first time I did it. I learned how to put it in there to get it in place. It took quite a while. It may take you 10 minutes to figure out how to get that piece in place up there, because it's really hard to snake in there. However, if you drop it, it will immediately fall out of there and fall to the bottom of the hole. So once you have it in there, we can put this bolt in, and I'm turning the bolt in now, and that will hold this piece up against the face of the enclosure there. I'm not going to tighten it real tight here now, because I want to mate it to another piece before I would even think about tightening it up very much. Next piece, here we go. Here's the next piece I'm going to work with. It's piece number 3, C85003. It has a beveled back flange here on the back. That actually slides up underneath the turbo and up behind the turbocharger there. And we're going to slide that in place from the bottom up. This little half moon cutout here will go around the edge of that pressure line to the turbocharger. This little cutout down here, down on the bottom, is actually to accommodate the return line from the bearing on the oil line from the return of that same turbocharger bearing. When we slide it up underneath there, we should be able to, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get a screw through one of these holes and into the piece that we just mounted. If not that one, then we should be able to get a screw through the bottom of that piece that we just mounted and hit one of these 2 screw holes here to hold these together. All right, I have got the piece in back here, piece number whatever it was, 4, 5. held in place with that bolt. I slid the piece up from the bottom here, and I was able to get a screw started in the back right ahead of that oil, where this oil line comes through down there. You have to reach around from behind and start the screw in. This piece against the compressor face here needs to be inside or above the first piece that we put on in the back, so that it rests on top of that, and then you can put a screw through just inside of that hole where the oil line comes through there and screw it up towards yourself. Now that's really challenging. The only way to get it tight in there, and I'm not sure I've got it tight, is with this little stubby screwdriver, the little bitty one. You have to reach around behind. I had to start the screw by hand. That's why you want those screw holes threaded ahead of time. Start the screw and then get this in it to try to snug that one up, and it is a challenge to do that. I'm not sure that any of the other holes that are there that you'll actually be able to get them to connect this piece. It will tie on with the piece above it and stuff, so that I think it won't go anywhere, but that one's a challenge to put in place, or to get screwed in place. The next piece is the piece that mates to it, comes down from on top. I had to trim a little bit here to make it fit cleanly or freely around that turbo bearing. I will correct the model there so that you get one that's cut sufficiently. Also, in order to get it down in place, I had to trim a tab here, cut this tab back, then bend it, cut it here and bend it out so that I could clear this. It's called a wastegate actuator, and then this piece will slide down in there, and then you can fold that tab back in line with where it's supposed to be. I may fix that on your permanent parts, or the production parts. Okay, I've slid this piece back down in here against the turbo face, and it should slip inside to the compressor side of the part underneath it, so that it overlaps on the inside. And then using a long driver, I've got about a foot long driver here, although 6 inches would probably do it. I'm going to put a screw in. There are 2 screw holes cut here. Well, I run another screw to the bottom of the hole. There are 2 screw holes here where these 2 overlap. I'd like to use them both, but you can't. The outer one, the screw would go through and it runs into the compressor housing. The inner one hits a gap in the compressor housing behind, and so we can use that one to tie these 2 together. I was mistaken when I said it needs to go to the inside. On this side of the bearing, it needs to be on the outside, the compressor side, so that it goes through the larger pilot hole first. And another screw. Okay, I got a screw run in there. I'm not going to make it real tight, but you would want that one snug, and that'll make this, it'll still be a little floppy right now, but it will sit around that turbo bearing and can't come off of there anymore. Alright, the next piece I'm going to put on is piece number 5. It's shaped like this. Focus on this larger hole, about a 3/8 inch diameter hole up here. I pulled a screw off the lower right hand corner of the turbocharger mount here, where that stainless steel box is held on. I'm going to slide this part underneath. I'm staying above or inside the adjacent piece to the left under the turbo. I slide this up till it's over that hole, and I've previously removed that bolt. I'm going to put the bolt back in. There, and that was perhaps the easiest piece in the whole set. that goes on there, but now we have some holes that should line up with the previous piece underneath. We'll try and get screws through those from the bottom up into this piece, and that will tie those two together and make it rigid. Alright, I was able to put a screw up from underneath and tie this piece that we just put in together to the previous bottom piece, and then I could reach around. You have to actually reach around from way back over here to the right of the choke. I call this thing the choke. You have to reach back around from the right all the way across here, and you can go behind this now, and I could get, there's several screw holes that will line up there that you can put a screw in from the back to the inside. They're not as bad to reach as it might seem. There's enough room, although you do end up doing it again with a little stubby screwdriver because there's no way to get anything else in there. Alright, we're back for the next piece. The piece is this long piece. It's piece number 8, and I've had to do some modifications to it, so I'll hopefully get these done so that you don't have to. I had to widen this slot on the right hand end, and I had to make this hole over here larger, and this tab fits around an actuator arm, and I would cut it a little bit here and here just so that you can fold it out of the way. I think we're going to want to fold it under, back on itself, under against the back side of this, and then when we get the piece in place we can bend that back around so that it fills a space between a little actuator arm that comes up and down through here. Okay, to put this piece in, I took the bolt that held our previous piece onto the stainless steel enclosure here. I took that one off because this one's going to catch in the upper left hand corner the same one. I also took off the 3 bottom bolts here on the enclosure because they're going to use these 3 holes. So once we have those, all 4 of those off, and this little gate back out of the way, we can slide this down in from on top, pretty much vertically. It may require a little bit of coercion, but it'll go. And it should slide over the top, over and closer to us than this piece, and drop down in like that. Once it's done that, I'm going to take one of these little stainless steel bolts and go through both of those pieces back in here. And bring this back up against that face. I'm going to put one in the middle one too. This one on the right is hard to reach, so I would do that last in case we have to take it off again. Okay, that's 2 on there. There are 2 more, but I would wait until we get some of the other pieces on just in case I should have to come back off for some reason. Now you can also put 1 screw through right here. I don't know that we can reach these others. We could try from above, see if we could shoot one through, drill it through this down here, but because it's bolted on here, I'm not too worried about it going anywhere. That one will help keep it lined up, but you can put more in if you can get them to go. It doesn't hurt to fasten it securely. Alright, the next piece, I'm down in the hole here. Right now we're looking at the outside of the turbocharger rather than the top now. The next piece I'm going to work with is piece number 6. I had to enlarge this hole that allows a return oil line that drops from the turbo bearing down. I had to deepen it back in here. I'll do that in the production versions then too. Hopefully you won't need to, but if you should, you can cut it larger. Again, I bend these pedals down so that the inside face isn't hard and sharp against that oil line. Once we have that and that done so it'll fit, we can slide this in up and underneath everything else here, and I've been able to get 2 screws, one over here near that choke underneath here. This little tab on the top here kind of overlays the top of this thing, just sits above it, but I've been able to get a screw in back in here and then some on the left side as well. Okay, once you get that tied together, then it's a little more firm in here, starts to hold it together. So I got that piece in. Next piece is probably the piece that wraps around this bottom of this on the right hand side. So that was piece number 6. Next piece we're going to put on is piece number 9. I had to deepen this notch here, otherwise it seems to fit. It slides in from the right underneath up against this shrouded choke member, and over it goes underneath the piece from the back. We should be able to put screws up from the bottom and in the back, and then we'll connect it across the front here later with other pieces. Okay, the next piece is piece number 10. It's the right hand end of the panel, goes around the end of this exhaust pipe riser over here. I don't know if I can see it very well from here. Anyway, I'll try and hold the camera. It covers this end. It fits. This piece seems to fit pretty well, but you could have to trim the top a little bit if it's too long. But this one is not, so far anyway. Has to go up there. And it should sit on top of this bottom tray, and maybe the piece in the back as well. Once we get it set in there, we can put screws up from the bottom that will lock it in place, and then we'll tie it together with these other panel pieces as well. Next piece I'm going to put in is number 11, C11. It has a flange on the left side and then a flange with no holes in it. The no holes one goes up here against the diesel oxidation catalyst, or DOC. That piece just fits in against the back panel here and screws in place. I may have to bend the flanges to match a little bit because I don't have the angles quite right, but otherwise this will screw in place to both the end panel and the bottom panel here. If we slip it up here, dropping screws all over the place. You get it up there, match it to the end, and there should be screw holes here that match up. Again, I didn't put all my screws in when I did the bench assembly, and that's a mistake. There we go. Now I'll come around from the end and put a single one on the end for now. You put them all in, but I'll put this one in. Okay, the next piece we're going to put in is number 12. It's, I don't know if you can see it at all. Anyway, it's that piece. It's the other side of the diesel oxidation catalyst can. It's got those fingers cut to fit around it. And in order to put it in place, I've made some enlarged cuts a little bit around these sensor wires so they'll clear it. You might have to do the same. You can always make those holes larger and then tighten it up with some of that aluminum foil tape if you need to. You don't want it to leak too much air at that point. Have to thread it up. I'm going to thread it up in between behind this support for that wire, and so we fit it around this sensor down here and around that one here, and we have screw holes down at the bottom that line up to put her together. And we can put some up this side as well. Again, I'm only putting in a few screws at it here because this is a dealer lot and I'm not going to leave it on the machine. Alright, the next piece we're going to put on is piece number 7. It's got this triangular side here, and it will slip in underneath this one, and over the top of this one on the bottom. It looks like it should go inside of this one. Okay, I note that I don't have a hole in the middle here. I'm going to do something that you can do if you need to as well. I'm just going to try and shoot a screw through there because these are self-drilling, self-tapping screws. There we go. Okay, that piece is in place. You got more screws to put in, but I don't need to put them all in. And the next piece is this one. It's probably the easiest piece in the kit. It's number 14. It just lays flat over here and you can screw it on. It'll tie these pieces together. You have to torque things a little bit because everything's twisted just a hair here on things, but from the outside the screws will go through, and I'll put a few in, but you can put them all around. Okay, the piece I want to show you now is piece number 15. It's this triangular piece that sits on the corner. It overlaps and screws on here. Eventually we'll have the top screwed down and it screws to a flange here. But I had to cut it in two in order to fit around this actuator. So when you receive your kit, it'll probably have two pieces, this upper piece and the lower one that'll slip in. You overlap it and screw on to fit around this odd geometry of this wastegate actuator. So that's piece number 15. It'll probably be 15 and 17 or something like that in your kit. But it'll be an upper piece that slides down around this and another piece, smaller piece that slips down in behind around and screws onto the others. The next piece we're going to put on is actually piece number 1, and I'll show it to you. It's this long piece with this cutout in it here to fit around here. I'm not going to take a lot of time to show you, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts on the top of this enclosure. We can pull those 4 bolts, slip this in place, put the bolts back on, and it's there. And it'll anchor the top and the rest of the kit. There, you should be able to see that piece in place up there. I put 2 of the bolts back in. I'll put the rest back in when I take it off. But that's that back piece. That leaves us 2 more pieces to put on. The top deck here, and 1 piece that covers up the back of the riser up to the DOC. So let's look at that top piece. It's going to fit, other than I've got to cut a notch out for this support member here. Otherwise that looks like it's in the right spot. I'll also cut part of this tab off to clear that sensor line. Alright, we're looking at the last piece to go on. I got the lid down here, although I had some screws that didn't want to fit in here. This arrangement around the riser to the DOC is kind of tight, but you can go 1 screw at a time and follow the pattern around. It'll pull them into place. This piece fits on here. There's 4 screws there, and there should be screws up both sides. The tab is missing here. I'll get that fixed in the model, and so you should have a tab to screw to through there, and there is a tab here. So I'll put this last piece on, and then we'll talk a little bit. Okay, I've got the last piece on over there. There's some aspects of this that don't fit perfectly. These fingers I've not bent out against this DOC, and they fit really tight. We can either bend them out or we could shorten them up a little bit. On the other end, it's really impossible to bend them. There's just not enough room, and so I may shorten them on the other end a little bit. Here we could then flare them out so that they press up against this and keep the dust out, but don't distort the tin on the top. Right now it's kind of distorted a little bit. Otherwise, it's mostly gone together pretty well on here. I've got this thing to fix around the wastegate actuator so that you'll have 2 pieces here instead of the original 1, and we'll try and tighten it up around this thing a little bit. This is the hole where your air supply will come in. We'll have a stub connector, they call it a takeoff, a HVAC takeoff, 4-inch one here that will come up, and then it usually hooks onto a 4-inch, they call it a Flex 90 galvanized fitting that'll come up and turn over the top of the go over the top of the oil fill cap here and head out alongside the ladder. Anyway, that'll go right in here. When you get your enclosure put on, if you've got gaps like I've got around here, especially on the fan side, on the radiator fan side, or these corners where we've got perforations and stuff like that. There's another hole up here, and this one around the sensor line over here. You can tape those up with some of that aluminum foil tape, and I usually run the tape, a strip of it, maybe 1 inch wide, over the top of the screw heads here anyway, because it keeps them from rattling loose. So you can do that all around with some of that foil tape that we send, and it'll tighten up the enclosure and keep it pressurized with clean air. Anyway, that's the steps to install the pieces on an 8250 model 2022 year, where they've got this stainless steel box around the manifold already, but they still have the turbo exposed. So I always caution people that, you know, even though this will stop the chronic fires that occur at the exhaust system on volatile crops, it can't guarantee that you won't have a fire in your combine, because there's many other things that can cause a ignition somewhere else, whether it's a radiator or a alternator throwing sparks, or an electrical short in some other location, or a hot bearing or whatever. So still need to be careful, but hopefully this reduces the stress during harvest due to fire, because we've got the exhaust system fully protected this way. All right, good luck, have a safe harvest.